welcome to Money Talks with Mia. I'm Mia Lee, escort, stripper, CPA, and recovery banker. Every week, we're going to talk about a topic that's going to steer you toward financial independence and wealth building. Today, we're talking about saving strategies for irregular income. If we're going to talk about saving strategies, first we need to understand what we're making and what we're spending. So I want to explain what a baseline budget is. So a baseline budget is just a very fancy way of saying you can use your current spending levels as a baseline for establishing future spending requirements. So for us as self-employed sole proprietors, meaning we don't have a business with W-2 employees and whatnot, I want us to include both our personal and business expenses in a baseline budget because they're one and the same. So I recommend using a 3-month period, then removing anything unusual like a one-time hospital bill for a car accident or the one time a client paid your rent if you don't expect that client to do so continuously on an ongoing basis. And I actually want you to start with your personal expenses, even if that might sound counterintuitive. So this is things like rent, mortgage, food costs, internet, cell phone, entertainment. Everyone spends something on entertainment realistically, even if you don't make a lot of money or if you make a lot of money. And you also want to include in this things like your transportation costs. So this is a non-comprehensive list, but I'm just giving you some examples of personal living expenses. And the reason we start with these is because you want to know what you're spending even when you're not working, right? So let's say you take some time off of work because you're ill or just because you want a mental health break or because you decide to gallivant around Africa and go on safari for a while. You want to know what your baseline spending is. So once you have that number, and keep that number to the side just for your own knowledge, now you want to add in your business expenses. So these are costs that you only incur while working. These are things like advertising, photo shoots, condoms, dungeon gear, house fees. Once you add these together, you essentially have a budget of both what you need to live on and what you need to run your business. Ideally, I would like everyone to have at least 6 months in emergency savings. Now, this can be a combination of cash, checking accounts, savings accounts, or even investments like securities, but they have to be liquid investments. So I'm not talking about real estate because you can't just sell a house whenever you want to sell a house in order to meet your emergency financial needs if anything were to happen to you. Like if you're a stripper and you break a leg, you want access to those emergency funds right away, right? So if your emergency funds are in something like S&P index funds, then you're fine. You can just sell those at any time, right? Even if you take a slight loss on them, they're still liquid securities that you can sell. So you want 6 months of liquid emergency savings. Next, I want to talk about differentiating between needs and wants. Now, this is much easier said than done, but we'll try to put a few tangible examples to it. Indulgences, everybody has them. We all spend money on things that make us happy. And what's the point of having money if you can't spend it on things that make you happy? Of course, I understand that. But you want to understand what is a need and what is a want. For me, for example, I strip in these Honey Birdette lingerie sets that cost about $300 to $400 a piece. And it's what I like wearing, what I feel comfortable in. I'm a top earner at the club. I'm cool with this. I have far beyond my 6-month emergency savings fund and I have retirement savings and all of that. So this is okay. Now, if my life were to suddenly change for a litany of circumstances and I did not have my 6-month emergency fund and I did not have a lot of money saved in retirement, then maybe I would opt for a $20 lace mesh dress that I can absolutely strip and make money in, and I would not replace my $400 Honey Birdette set. Now, contrary to expensive lingerie for stripping, I need pleasers, right? Like, even if they weren't pleasers, I would still need a pair of shoes to dance in. I cannot dance at the club barefoot, right? So shoes for stripping are definitely a need. Now, $50 pleasers are a need. If you want to strip in $1,000 Louboutins, that's definitely a want, right? Or another example of a need versus want is like condoms, right? I cannot escort safely without condoms. That's definitely a need. There's no way that I can budget my way out of that one. Ideally, you should only be buying wants after you have your 6-month emergency fund. And when I say wants, these are wants that are kind of nice to have things for us to do business and make money. This is not the Chanel bag that maybe we can buy after we have met all of our long and short-term savings goals for retirement and housing and whatnot. That you should put off for later. But little things that you want, that you enjoy, and that would make your work easier to do, these are the ones I'm talking about that you can afford after you have a 6-month emergency fund. So I also want to talk about prioritizing savings during high earning periods. So there was this really interesting behavioral economic studies of Uber drivers and how they were essentially inefficiently prioritizing their high and low demand hours. So basically, they found that Uber drivers would work less during surge pricing and busier times because they would just hit a certain number and they would stop working. And then instead they would work longer hours during low earning times. So that was reducing their total average hourly earnings, and they were actually working more hours than they needed to hit their earnings goals than if they had just worked primarily during high earning periods. Let's contrast this to how I have done the opposite of this as a stripper. So I don't strip 12 months out of the year. Strip clubs in New York are busy from approximately October until December, and then again from March until the end of June. The slow months are January and February and July and August. I only dance during the busy months because I would rather work more hours during the busy times when there's a higher earning potential and then not work at all unless I'm called in by a host during the slow times, because I can essentially work the same or maybe even fewer hours and make more money, because it doesn't make sense for me to be working more just to hit the same number for my shift or my week during slower times. So I also want to talk a little bit about evaluating expenses and cutting unnecessary ones. Now, I'm not talking about the Starbucks coffee that you buy and brings you a lot of joy to start your day, or, if you go to a corner coffee shop. I'm talking about the stuff that you probably forgot you were paying for, right? I'll give you a kind of embarrassing example. When I retired from finance, I was subscribed to probably about 15 different financial journals and trade journals. And I mean, we're talking about things like hot topics and bankruptcy restructuring, okay? Like things that I forgot I was paying for. Like I had a subscription to the Harvard Business Review. I didn't go to Harvard. I haven't opened that magazine in about 7 years. And I think 7 years ago is when I got the subscription. I don't know why. So one of the things I finally got around to doing later than I should have is I looked through my credit card statements and looked at all the recurring charges of the business journals that I was subscribed to. And I think I got rid of 15 of them and kept 2, which were The Economist and The Wall Street Journal, the only 2 that I actually read. Do better than me. Probably look at that every 3 to 6 months and see if you're paying for a website that you haven't used in 2 years. Are you booking with a photographer that you might not be getting as much value as you would like to from? Take a look at your expenses, determine which ones are not really yielding value for you, and try to either cut them out or replace them with something that has a better return for you. Another thing that we should all be doing is automating our savings. So even though we have lumpy income, ups and downs, busy months, slow months, we should still be able to automate our savings. And here's how. If you do a 1-year look back, you can kind of set a realistic goal of how much money you can save based on how much money you're making and how much money you're spending. If you made $50,000 in the last 6 months and you want to become a millionaire, that's not going to happen in 6 months, right? I'm not saying that's not going to happen ever, but it's going to take a little longer than 6 months. Contrarily, let's say you made $200,000 last year and you have a baseline budget of $90,000, including your personal and work expenses. Then after taxes, it is very realistic to save $50,000 a year. So you can break that down. I mean, you probably don't want to just put $50,000 in one chunk. You probably don't have $50,000 in one chunk to put into a savings account or an investment account or whatever it might be. But it's much more realistic to break that down and say, I'm going to put $4,200 a month into a savings account or into an investment account. Or you can break that down further and say, I'm going to put $1,000 every single week into my savings account or my investment account. Now, at the end of the year, you're going to have $50,000, but you don't have to look at this giant number that seems insurmountable. You can put away $1,000 a week. So the last thing I want to talk about with respect to low income periods is I just want to acknowledge that we've all had months where we earned less than our expenses. I certainly have. If you haven't, congratulations. You are in the rare minority of being both extremely lucky and extremely good, and I'm happy for you. That's not the reality most of us live in. So discipline is the bedrock upon which successful financial management is built during low income periods. I know it's tempting to fall into self-loathing and despair when you're not making money. I have definitely done this. I have definitely been there. But instead, I would encourage all of us to use that time to check your spending against your baseline budget and see if that's a realistic budget, or do you need to reevaluate it? And that's an example of doing something like admin work. So actually, I set my priorities like so in this order during my slow times. First, I rest, and then I do my admin work, and then I plan and make investments in my business for the future, like photo shoots or launching a YouTube channel. That's all I have on this topic. I'm Mia Lee. You can take the girl off Wall Street, but you can't take the banker out of the whore. Leave me your questions, comments, and suggestions for future episodes.